This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jespersen.
Well, Real Talkers, this is the recurring joke. Anytime one of you approaches in the wild, which is like my favorite thing. I love having a chance to shake your hands, to say thank you for making Real Talk part of your regular routine. You come up and the recurring joke, at least for the past couple of years, has been, well, no shortage of things to talk about, or what do you think you'll talk about on the next show? And we all laugh knowingly because the news cycle never stops. We're looking forward to checking in with strategist Sharan Kaur in just a moment. We're going to talk about Mark Carney's comments about Israel in Lebanon. We'll talk about Donald Trump's promise that the war in Iran will be over very soon. We'll get to new NDP leader Avi Lewis's plan for public grocery stores. And by the way, take a second to recognize the incredible legacy of his father, Stephen Lewis. Amazing service to his country over decades. Stephen Lewis passing away just one day ago at the age of 88, just 2 days after his son won the federal NDP leadership, just like his grandpa did years before. And we'll talk about Alberta's Bill 25. Alberta says that it will get rid of politics and ideology in schools. It's a promise that's been alluded to for quite some time by Alberta's Education Minister Demetrios Nicolaides, who, by the way, will join us on the show next week to talk about this. And it's got people talking across the country for sure. I look forward to seeing what you have to say in the live chat or in your emails after you hear this on the podcast to talk@ryanjespersen.com. That coming up on the show. Now, if you've been paying attention to politics, you've likely also seen the headlines around the Alberta Whiskey Act, which perfectly sets the table for me letting you know that our friends at Hansen Distillery are presenting this episode of the show. This Alberta Whiskey Act is a huge deal for whiskey distillers in our home province of Alberta. It means that just like champagne in France or scotch from Scotland, if your Alberta whiskey isn't legit Alberta, you can't call it Alberta whiskey. Now, producers say that this is a huge deal, including our friends at Hansen Distillery, Edmonton's original distillery. Now, they've been doing this the entire time, of course, making sure that in Alberta that the whiskey's got to be aged for a minimum 3 years in wood. Hansen's aging up to 7 years. We told you that about their special releases earlier this year. They have a 5-year aged, they have a 3-year aged. To be an Alberta whiskey under the new legislation, it's got to be a minimum 40% alcohol content. The water's got to be from Alberta. 2/3 of the grains have got to be from Alberta. And of course, the whiskey itself must be mashed, fermented, aged, and bottled in Alberta. That's exactly what Hansen's been doing since inception. The first distiller in the Metro Edmonton region. That's something they should be and are very proud of. You can learn more about Hansen's whiskey offerings by checking out their website, hansendistillery.com. You can shop it right there. That sherry cask whiskey, French oak, incredible stuff. Just one of their many offerings. If you're looking for more about whiskey, you can sign up for Hansen's whiskey list. And you can also, of course, find Hansen whiskey wherever you find fine Alberta spirits, including a visit to their distillery. If you're anywhere near, it's on 174th Street, 111th Avenue in the capital city, just north of Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Hansen Distillery is made right here. All right, well, you tell me, Real Talkers, if you think that this is a big one. I do, and I think it's going to land hard in a lot of Alberta classrooms. Danielle Smith's UCP government is introducing sweeping new legislation aiming at what it's called removing ideology from schools. Alberta's Education Minister Demetrios Nicolaides says that the goal is simple. Classrooms should teach kids how to think, not what to think. But what does it actually mean in practice? The Bill 25, would limit teachers and school boards from making political or social statements outside their mandate. It would restrict which flags can be displayed. It's just the Canadian or the Alberta flag outside of schools, with some exceptions, says the government. We'll see what that means. It would give the province more control over certain areas like naming schools, approving superintendents, or even setting strategic priorities for school boards. It'll ensure that the national anthem, O Canada, is sung in classrooms at least once a week. My son, by the way, I did a little research on this, tells me that they're already doing that every Friday morning at their elementary school. Real Talkers, if you're catching this on our live stream presented by California Closets, let us know in the chat if the same holds true at your kid's school. I think that's actually a big deal, and I think it actually sends a subtle or maybe even outspoken message around Alberta's future in Canada, doesn't it? Interesting timing on that one. It also builds, Bill 25 does, on earlier moves from this government. Parental opt-ins around gender identity and sexuality, rules around pronouns and parental notification there, and last year's controversial push to remove explicit materials from classrooms and school libraries, colloquially known as the book ban. Now, supporters say that this makes perfect sense. It's all about neutrality, focus, getting back to basics, reading, writing, arithmetic, and critical thinking. But critics are, of course, raising red flags. Educators warning that this could have a chilling effect, especially in social studies classrooms where teachers may start to second guess what they can say or what they can teach or how they can facilitate discussion. Remember that teacher in Fort Saskatchewan who was caught, so to speak, on audio from a student who had a phone in class and sent it to a right-wing influencer who blew the story up? The opposition says, led by Naheed Nenshi, that it's not even clear what ideology means in this context. We'll ask him what he thinks, and he joins us in the next episode of the show. And whether or not this is even really about balance or drawing political lines. In fact, does it infuse more politics into classrooms? So bottom line, it's a government saying that it wants less politics in schools, and critics are arguing that this is politics in schools. Let's get into it with Sharan Kaur, formerly a senior staffer with Finance Minister Bill Morneau through that era, now a principal at Navigator. I apologize for how long it's been since we had you on the show. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, what do you think? Taking politics out of schools or infusing politics into schools? A little bit of both?
So this is a hard one. I think if we're to look at it from a surface level, this is very much about politics. Alberta hasn't been a province that's been shy to say what they believe should be allowed in schools and not. And I've had a lot of conversations with parents who have shared a level of discomfort around what is and what isn't shared in schools. And I think this is purely about, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, folks in Alberta, I think the Alberta government is uncomfortable that things like sexuality are spoken about in schools, images in books, all of that, politics, what's happening in the Middle East. I think they just don't want anyone to have these conversations with editorial that's going to make kids go in a certain direction. I think a lot of this has to do with how people are talking about the LGBTQ2+ community and what kids take away from that. So I don't think this is so much about, I wouldn't call it censorship, but I think it's their way of trying to control the conversations that are happening. But I will say, though, I've talked to parents specifically when it comes to the conversation about sexuality discussed in schools. And I think there's a really fine line difference between what some families and parents would call like indoctrinating children versus educating them. And I think that is what has been lost amongst teachers and the education system. And parents are viewing this as children are being indoctrinated to think one way or the other. And I think there would have been a better medium to solve this than having to change things altogether. But that's my gut. That's what I'm taking away from this, is I think this is more about preventing a certain type of ideology from being shared.
Yeah. I get the idea around that chilling effect, and I saw that phrase a few times from people that are posting. I haven't seen a lot of teachers that use their real names in their bios that are sharing their thoughts on this. You know, it sort of strikes me as an area where maybe at this point individual educators are feeling like it's not worth sticking their neck out on it. It's also probably safe to say that it's a continuation of, I would say, not just the narrative, but the reality that Alberta's teachers, generally speaking, and I'm sure that there are exceptions, but Alberta's teachers have been butting heads with Alberta's conservative government for quite some time. The most obvious example would be the teachers' strike just this past fall, the government invoking the notwithstanding clause to order them back to work. But had there been a reality where Alberta's teachers were being criticized for bootlicking this government and presenting and promoting conservative or pro-conservative messaging in classrooms, this wouldn't be an issue at all. This is the government indicating, I think, that it feels that teachers in the province are inherently opposed to conservative politics, and not just that, but promoting the alternative.
And I think there is validity to that in many places. Like, I'm trying to think back to when I was a student in elementary school so many moons ago. There was never any conversations about politics. And I would say the world of politics was far more benign. We weren't living in an era of all of what we're seeing now. So I always used to say, I thought our civics classes were a joke because you actually never learned anything about politics. But we do live in a period now where I think some teachers and educators do bring in their personal beliefs. And I think this is a hard one. How do you separate your personal ideology when you're teaching? I'm not a teacher, but I think that even in my conversations with people, you try to find balance in what you say. But I think everyone's hyper triggered right now. People are so hyper triggered because they feel like their rights are being taken away or they're not allowed to express who they are. We're living in a time when politics have just gone off the deep end. And I think that transfers into the classrooms. Like I've talked to families whose teachers sometimes go a little too far. But there's got to be better mechanisms around how we either set guardrails or that we give parameters or allow certain conversations to be had in far more contained settings. It shouldn't be, we shouldn't use teaching students as an opportunity at that age to politicize things. Like, these are kids who are coming to learn the fundamentals. They're coming to learn grammar. They're coming to learn math, geography. Like, there are basics that need to be taught before we can dive deep into certain policy aspects. And I think that we have to remember that, and that the school boards and teachers do too.
Yeah, the flags one is interesting. I see people, there's a lot of comments in the chat right now. People are saying that's a direct shot, that's a direct attack at pride. Some folks are invoking the crisis, the war in the Middle East. You're going to say which one? Obviously, I know that the presence of a Palestinian flag on stage at the NDP convention in Winnipeg this past weekend set off a bunch of people, including Alberta's former premier, Jason Kenney. They say there could be some exceptions, which I think could be interesting. Does Alberta risk sending a message to the rest of the country that harms its brand or its reputation? Is there damage being done here nationally or even internationally?
It does sometimes, but these are not discussions that are solely being had in Alberta. I would say when it comes to the flag, I think that provinces, cities, in the country as a whole, we've kind of adapted to flying. We have our Canadian flag, our provincial flags, and our municipal flags, but we have kind of adopted to, when it's Pride Month, we do put a pride flag up at City Hall here in Toronto to celebrate the LGBTQ2+ community. But the fine line is, can we do that without people politicizing it? Putting the flag up as a whole should not just be about politicization. It should be about celebrating communities. But now that we're in an era where you've got the war in the Middle East, where people are very triggered if they see a Palestinian or an Israeli flag, and I think that is, I don't think schools can participate in, maybe schools shouldn't participate in putting flags up of other countries, because it just creates a further divide, and that's what triggers these negative environments in schools. And you know what? Have these conversations at home with your parents. Do your research, believe in what you want to believe in. But perhaps schools are maybe a place that we have to have some neutrality, but by still celebrating certain communities. And I think one that's going to be really hard for schools to not put up is a flag like the LGBTQ, the pride flag, because again, no one in these schools is telling students you have to pick if you want to be gay. That's not what's happening. It shouldn't be happening that way. This should be about, we're here to celebrate you. We're here to accept you. No one should feel alienated. And I think that's where they're missing the point. I think people are viewing this as indoctrination, and it's not.
Sharan Kaur is joining us in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West in our live chat. Interesting comments here. Rob, watching us on Facebook, thanks Rob, says there's an element in the province that wishes they could be like Oklahoma. They ban books. They will ban people. Rob says it's important to know who the bad guys are. Tracy says, for those of us that have been involved in public schools, Alberta has enjoyed one of the best education systems in the world. Melissa says, usually when conservatives say they want to take out politics and ideology, what they mean is they don't want kids exposed to so-called liberal thoughts. Thunder God says, thank God they're removing these things from schools. It's about time common sense rules again. Nick says the veneer of removing ideology is so thin. I wonder if that's the point. Bullying isn't as rewarding to your ego if your target isn't clear. And then we've got a bunch of people like Karen also watching on Facebook who wonders, how will the separatists feel about O Canada being sung at least once a week? My son tells me every Friday after the morning announcements, they all stand. If they're able, he says, they remove their hats if they're wearing one, and they sing O Canada. This is actually the one that jumped out at me the most. If this is truly, maybe I'm being devil's advocate here, but if it's truly a separatist government, if it's truly the anti-Canada government, as some people are presenting the UCP, why on earth would they include O Canada here? They didn't have to. What is this? Is this messaging? Is this trying to say something to the Albertans that would remain?
It's weird to me they only do it once a week, because throughout my education in elementary and secondary school, we had it every day, every single day here in Ontario. I think there is a possibility that that might trigger some, but quite frankly, at the end of the day, and this is said with all due respect, the separatist movement in Alberta, what I would say to everyone who is so gung-ho to jump on that bandwagon and go down south, you don't need to change your province to do that. You can pick up and leave. We're Canadian first. We have to have Canadian pride first. And if your gut reaction is to want to be the 51st state or to separate, I think you're not actually as patriotic as you can be. I think you care about yourself and what your values are for your province. You don't care about the country. And if a true patriot would do what they could to fight for their country, and this is a message I would say to the Quebec separatist movement and a message to the Alberta separatist movement, quite frankly, we should be playing it every single day out there for all the separatists in Alberta. If your decision to want to not be part of a country because you don't think you're getting enough resources out of the ground, or if you just don't like the government in Ottawa, you're not a patriot. You're a coward.
I agree. And this is one of the rare moments where this show is taking a strong stance and planting our Canadian flag on this one without apology. We will note and acknowledge the separatists claim that they have reached the minimum threshold for signatures to get their question on Alberta's referendum coming up later in October. And obviously, we'll be talking a ton about that. Let's get to federal politics. There's a lot to talk about, including Avi Lewis's big win as the next leader of the NDP. But I would be remiss if I didn't recognize and note the incredible career of Avi's father, Stephen Lewis. Spent more than 5 decades at the forefront of public service, from leading Ontario's NDP in the 1970s to serving as Canada's ambassador to the UN. By the way, appointed by Brian Mulroney, a globally respected humanitarian voice, most notably a special envoy for HIV and AIDS in Africa, where he called out global inequities with incredible and at that time rare moral clarity. And his legacy continues through the Stephen Lewis Foundation, through championing grassroots responses to HIV and AIDS and cementing that legacy that he had defined, as mentioned, through more than 50 years. Really incredible. So his son, 2 days before his dad's passing, wins the federal NDP leadership by a resounding margin, double the votes of the second place finisher, Alberta's Heather McPherson. And he is pedal to the metal, putting his stamp on this party, including talk around public grocery stores. There's no doubt that grocery prices have, in many cases, skyrocketed out of reach for many Canadians. We're getting emails from people talking about their family hasn't had meat, that they're putting water into their milk. I mean, this is real life stuff. I want to get your take on it, but we'll have Avi Lewis in his own words first. Here he is, the new leader of the NDP.
I've been talking to NDP members for the last 6 months, and I'm really looking forward to getting out and talking to Canadians from coast to coast to coast. You use the word nationalizing, which is not a word that we use. We talk about a public option for groceries and cell phones and stuff like that, because it's not about taking existing businesses into the public sector, although that is an option in certain cases. We're talking about, for instance, with groceries, developing a chain of 50 publicly owned and operated grocery stores across the country with 6 or 7 regional distribution hubs that would be able to provide groceries to Canadians 30 to 45% cheaper than what they're paying right now. The outrageous cost of food in Canada. Just recent figures came out showing that a majority of Canadians are restricting meals, portion sizes, or skipping meals because of cost. Now, we did a digital add your name campaign during the leadership campaign to just blast this idea out there on social media platforms. And we got thousands of responses from conservatives who were interested in this idea of a public option for groceries. Canadians are suffering the grinding cost of living crisis, and we're actually providing solutions that are as big as the crises we face. They're out-of-the-box solutions, we understand that, and people are looking for exactly that. So I think there is going to be broader appeal. I'm really looking forward to getting a chance to pitch these ideas to Canadians.
All right, so that's Avi Lewis, courtesy of the CBC. There's no doubt a lot of the stuff he's saying is true about folks' financial reality. Does something like this fly? Alberta's Premier says it's communist.
So, listen, I think that Avi Lewis, even within the NDP movement, was not necessarily the most liked or wanted by a lot of the members there. But what I can say is he's a really good communicator when it comes to communicating the issues a lot of people feel, and we've seen that through his career and what he's done. Now, where he's going to lose people is where he does say some of the things that are. I think he said something at the convention that just made me chuckle a bit, where he said no one ever bombed a sunshine factory, and I look at stuff like that, and I'm just like, oh, okay, whatever. But what he's talking about when it comes to food and the cost of living, the City of Toronto and Mayor Olivia Chow just recently announced a number of city-run grocery stores. This is something that we're seeing, I think, in New York City as well. And I think the whole purpose of it is to address the cost of living and making sure that food prices are not being inflamed in the way they are at stores. So do I think it's a communist idea to do that? No, I actually don't. I think we would be doing a disservice to those who are living in the affordability crisis to say it is. But we haven't seen governments and companies do anything at a scale that is going to help people on the affordability front. We talk about, so the government, the federal government, the provincial government, all these governments will do measures, whether it's like GST rebates on food or what Rob Canoe just did when he took off the PST off of like grab to go foods, and all those little things sure could matter if you're not paying PST on a rotisserie chicken, but that's not enough. That's not enough for a lot of families who are trying to keep their kids fed or things moving. Like, things are expensive, and we look at the concept of affordability as this like elephant in the room where governments put all these measures in place, and while they might do something on the bigger scale, it's like, yeah, we did this one thing to take off GST off a certain thing or HST off of something, but it's not actually doing enough for those who are in dire need. So I don't think that it's fair to call ideas like city-run grocery stores communist ideas. I think you can align them with a left-wing ideology, but at the end of the day, if they're helping people and those who are specifically in need, we should look at them at a lens of why are we doing them.
I want to ask you about Mark Carney's comments about Israel in Lebanon, but first, I think it makes sense to take a look at where the White House is, Donald Trump in particular, on the war in Iran. He's talking about the United States potentially pulling out of NATO, and essentially said that a lot of the United States' longtime allies are essentially on their own when it comes to energy security, when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, when it comes to skyrocketing gas prices. I would say it's wild, but in the context, it kind of feels par for the course. Here's the President of the United States.
We'll be leaving very soon, and if France or some other country wants to get oil or gas, they'll go up through the Strait and Hormuz Strait. They'll go right up there, and they'll be able to fend for themselves. I think it'll be very safe, actually, but we have nothing to do with that. What happens in the Strait, we're not going to have anything to do with, because these countries, China will go up and they'll fuel up their beautiful ships and they'll leave and they'll take care of themselves. There's no reason for us to do it. France
can fend for itself. We have nothing to do with it. Where do you want to start here? He's obviously choked that NATO allies didn't jump to get involved in Iran. This is everybody's wondering if American ground troops will be touching down there. But what are you keeping a close eye on here?
Oh, everything. Watching what's been happening out in the region has been like terrifying and absolutely like gut-wrenching and sickening to watch. A lot of the places that have been bombed are places that I've lived, places that I've worked, and to see the over-politicization of how Donald Trump has done this is like, to me personally, just feels like really disgusting. And the whole concept of, oh, well, NATO, like expecting that NATO allies would have jumped in right off the bat. I think he's so wrong, because if he went into this with an actual motive of getting rid of a regime and allowing self-determination in Iran and helping the people, just like he did in Venezuela, where he apparently went in to free the people. But what's happened there, like everything here has been driven by one thing, and that has to do with what sits under the ground of these countries. And there's been zero clarity around when is this war going to end. He's killing leader after leader after leader. And I think it's very fair to acknowledge that the IRGC is extremely bad and extremely horrible. But when you're killing and assassinating the people in that I would say administration that you're supposed to be negotiating with, there's no beginning and no end here. This is going, when has the US ever got involved in a country in the Middle East and left it off in a better place? I know there's a large Iranian population who is of the view that this is really good because it's freeing them of these individuals who are holding them in repressive states. But then you look at Lebanon as well. I have no doubt that there are concerns for countries like Israel, but what's happening right now is a very politicized, and it just to me seems like Israel is pulling all the strings on what Donald Trump is doing, and we're seeing no end of sight here. And it doesn't matter how many NATO allies get involved. It doesn't matter how many troops you send out there. All we're going to see is more dead bodies, no change in government, and a market that is going to continue to crash in a way that could have been avoided.
Mark Carney in Wakefield, Quebec, just within the last 24 hours, using the strongest language that his government has to date on Israel's action in Lebanon, Israel's invasion of Lebanon. And I wanted to pick your brain on the significance of it. But let's get to what he had to say first. Here's the Prime Minister out of Quebec.
It's an illegal invasion of Lebanon. It's a violation of their territorial sovereignty, integrity, sovereignty. And the point I was making as well, from a practical perspective, the government of Lebanon has banned Hezbollah, is taking action, is trying to take action against Hezbollah and their terrorist activities and their threats to Israel, and that is the purported justification for this invasion. So we condemn it.
We condemn it, an illegal invasion. Why is it significant when a G7 leader, when Canada's Prime Minister uses that specific language?
It's significant because it's the truth, right? And it's a truth that makes a lot of people who are on one side of a war very uncomfortable. And again, I'm going to say this very delicately because I feel like the nuance in the conversation of the Middle East has been lost on many. I think everyone should be denouncing the horrific events that have occurred in Israel October 7th and after that and before that. The anti-Semitism and the hate that is on rise, all of that is unacceptable. But what I think people are afraid of pushing back on Israel right now, and I know I've said it, and whenever I say it, I'm immediately targeted and told that I'm anti-Semitic or that I support Hamas and Hezbollah. But we saw Israel do this in the West Bank. We have seen members of the Israeli government openly talk about the fact that the area of Gaza and parts of Lebanon and parts of Egypt, they refer to it as the greater Israeli area. It is so clear and it is so obvious that there is an agenda of further taking over that space, which is against every international rule and should be condemned. But I'm happy to see the Prime Minister say something about it because so many people are afraid to say something about it. The Lebanese government and Hezbollah are two complete separate entities, and the Lebanese government has come out and has said they denounce them. Hezbollah, for the most part, has been taken down to like nuts and bolts of what they were operating on before. And this argument for Israel to go in and further attack is purely a play to kind of creep in more and more, and they're being allowed to do so because they have the US in their corner, and who's going to fight back at the US on this? And I just think that I think people need to be a bit more critical and open-minded around who's really pulling the strings there, and for what reasons are they pulling the strings? Because to go into Lebanon the way they've done it, to me, is it's a sovereign area, which is basically being attacked, and we should be a lot louder than we are being.
Before we thank you for your time, and I want to let the audience know that I flew this past you ahead of time to make sure you're cool with talking about it. But you got pretty personal on your social media recently, letting people know the standards that you insist on being upheld, what you found to be unacceptable, etc. I don't know that I am friends with or adjacent to anyone that faces more online abuse than you, and that's saying something. But you've oftentimes shared criticisms, around your political appearance or your intellect or whatever. People taking shots at you from every direction. You have a lot of fun with it on your Instagram with the eye roll emojis, and I guess everyone gets a chuckle out of it. But I've sent you a private message from time to time saying, like, geez, like, are you okay? Is everything all right? And you've had this, like, tough exterior for sure. But people that look to find you on X now and follow you will note that your account has been taken down. What's going on?
Yeah, so listen, you and I talked about this. I'm not at all a shy person, specifically when it comes to politics. I've always been one to voice my opinion, and maybe more so than some would be comfortable with doing. I say things as they are. I'm not afraid to throw a couple punches when I have to, but I always try to do so in a way that it's never about people in a personal manner. It's usually about, like, really horrible takes or the stands of things, and I've had people far and wide, including the networks that I work with, say to me, it's really weird because out of all the people that appear on our shows or on the radio or who write for us, we don't get the close to the amount of hate messages or feedback or complaints as we do about you.
Yeah.
And it's never about the substance beyond, like, I get called a liberal shill all the time, but I've had social media for a long time, but what led to me kind of deactivating it and going dark for a bit was so I get a lot of people who take my image and, like, just alter it in a way that's like was supposed to be funny. They'll add horns onto my face or, like, change something about me. A lot of people who comment on my skin tone, and I joke about this because you've seen this on my posts where it's like I'm constantly reminding people this is not a tan. Like, this is not a tan. I am Southeast Asian.
Right.
Putting it out there for all the listeners and viewers. But I get a lot of that. I get a lot of the, oh my God, is she black? Is she white? Why is she trying to change her skin tone? And she must be tanning too much, like Donald Trump. But last week, in what felt like some sort of coordinated effort, I have, like, blocked folders in my inbox of my social media, and I had opened them, and there was a number of groups. I'm not going to say right wing. I'm going to say, like, populist, super far right wing individuals who just think anything and everything this government does is horrible, where they had taken my photo and my image and, like, done a deep fake version of it. And for people who don't necessarily know what deep fakes are, it's like a very realistic version of somebody. But in this case, they had turned it into a pornographic image. And it wasn't so much of the fact that someone did that, because I'm used to people taking my image and doing whatever with it. It was in the manner of how they distorted it and the actions it had me doing, and the way it kind of like, it was a jarring thing to see, because if anyone has seen, like, there's a lot of really good deep fakes out there, and people also can't tell the difference if they know something is right or wrong. Like, I get notes from my mom all the time saying, oh my God, did you see that video on Instagram? Is that real or AI? I'm like, that's AI, mom. But a lot of people don't know. So to have something like that happen, I thought was a pretty horrendous thing to do to somebody, just because it was jarring. And like, listen, I worked with all the right folks to get it taken down, and I'm sure it's somewhere it's circulating, doing whatever. But for the most part, I can't find it. But I found it jarring. I found it upsetting and jarring. And it's interesting how people react to when something like that happens, because for the most part, everyone was like, oh God, this is horrible. Like, can't believe that happened. But it was funny because somebody who, and I'm not going to use names because I'm not throwing the person who showed me this under the bus, but it was interesting how little compassion people have left. I had somebody who sent a journalist a message saying, who posted my comment out there to say, like, this is horrible. She gets the most amount of hate that anyone does out there. And this individual who happens to run or is the executive director of a mental health organization, responded back and said something along the lines of, if you knew who she was and how she was really with others, you wouldn't feel bad for her.
Jeez.
And kind of like implying like she deserved it. And like, I didn't say anything to them because I'm like, it would have broken the trust of the journalist they shared it with. But this is someone who is a center-leaning political person who is the executive director of an organization that has to deal with mental health stuff. And to hear someone say that, it just shows me that we have lost the plot in all things. So I deactivated my X account because I didn't want to deal with it. Like, anytime I write something, I appear on something, all you got to do is search my name and you see it. But I think
Sharan, we see it every time you're on the show.
And I'm sorry, I have to, you know what I say?
Give me a break.
It's so funny. I say sorry to my work colleagues here all the time because they get stuff tagged onto our work account. I say sorry to my producers at Bell because they get the messages. I have to say sorry to like so many people because I'm like, I'm so sorry that you have to see that stuff.
No.
And it's, to me, it's just like there's a difference between, if I was out there saying some pretty crazy, vile things, like, you know what, come at me. But sharing my views on politics immediately turns into something about her race. Like, people talk about my facial features, like the number of people who are obsessed with my face and how much they dislike it to me. It's like, I was like, I'm so confused. Like, why does my forehead trigger you guys so much? Like, what is it? Like, I don't know. So,
well, I mean, and listen, if I was being, and like, I can't, like I said, and I don't use the words without intent. Like, I'm serious. I've never seen anyone face as much abuse. And keep in mind, I hosted a terrestrial talk radio show when Rachel Notley interrupted a 44-year conservative dynasty, and I was on a conservative text line every morning from 9 to noon. Like, I've seen the worst. And yours is worse. And I'm not trying to be funny at all. I'm actually troubled by it. And I'll share with the audience, I've sent you private messages, like just checking on your mental health as a friend, because I can't believe it. The deep fake, the AI porn, it's a whole other level. We've seen some stories in Canada, including like a high school student who was creating deep fakes of a classmate or at least a girl around his age that was facing serious consequences, legal consequences for that. It's relatively new on the horizon. You're absolutely right. It's very difficult to tell the difference between real or fake. A lot of people won't have the courage of conviction or the public profile or maybe the confidence that you do in dealing with this. That doesn't mean that they're not being targeted by this as well. What are you doing about it besides, and I'm not trying to put an onus on you here, I'm just curious, besides deactivating your X account? Like, do you report it? Would you look into pressing charges? Like, how will it impact you moving forward?
Yeah, and like, listen, I had a conversation about it with Minister Evan Solomon, who, like, for those who don't know, I ran his campaign. He's someone I care about deeply and know well, and the AI portfolio falls under him, and he was distraught in the sense that he's like, from a personal perspective that it happened, but was like, yeah, this is why we're putting certain bills in place. And I think what I'd say to folks in government and law enforcement, because taking AI outside of it, people in the public space, whether it's AI imagery, whether it's just online hate and threats towards regular people, but also to politicians and people who are public figures, the system doesn't take it seriously enough. I can tell you the number of times I've gone to the cops where I've filed reports because I've had threats laid against me. I had someone found my office phone number that's attached to my computer Teams, and they were calling me nonstop in the middle of the night, just saying some crazy illicit things. And all of this, like, I get a lot of that and I see a lot of it. And like, people will send you messages saying like, oh, we wish you died, or like get hit by a bus, or you're this, you're that. But no one really truly does anything about it. So we, people like myself who are accustomed to it, get used to kind of rubbing it off, or like just taking it off our shoulders and saying, you know what, it is what it is. And something my mother said to me the other day was, that's not enough, because what is it doing for your safety, right? So something I've been harping about for years, and during my time in politics as well, is that we don't take people's safety seriously enough when it comes to hate out there and what people say and what they do, because you never know when someone's going to act. And we've seen people do some horrible things, and we shouldn't have to wait for national stories about shootings or people driving into things or whatever the case may be, because all this hate leads to something. And from my experience, I've had zero positive experience with, like, bless the law enforcement. They do a lot of work. The last thing they need is me knocking on their door. But there's nothing really that's done to make us feel safe beyond me carrying like coyote spray around with me at nighttime, or I'm just being cognizant if someone notices me on a street or in a hallway. And then the block button. The block button is something that I've become very accustomed to. I press block a lot. But it doesn't change the fact that there's people out there willing to go to an extreme to say things that do make you worried if you and your family and those around you are in a safe place.
I just want to let you know, for what it's worth, you've got an army of support in our live chat today, powered by Park Power, men and women. I don't know if that's relevant or not, but I thought I'd mention, a lot of people, Tracy D is just like, what's wrong with people here? Melissa says this is absolutely sad and disgusting. She says you can disagree with somebody politically, but there needs to be lines drawn. Like, this is not acceptable or okay at all. Was it shared on X, this video?
Yeah, I had it DM'd to me on X and Instagram.
It was DM'd from the person who purportedly created it, or somebody that was looking out for you?
So I don't know. I know it was definitely not, they were definitely not looking out for
Okay.
me. It was sent to me by one of these, like, what I call the bot accounts on both platforms, into my DMs, and there was like a number of people on that chat, and it's there's definitely no looking out. And anytime I get any of these, like, it's always it's always done in a way that's like, oh my God, look at her. And there's like, I talk a lot about and this is my concern with the right-wing influencer base that I think the Conservatives federally have tapped into, is they're very quick at triggering their armies to kind of come at you. And if you were to go look at anything any of those guys have written about me or posted about me, you'll see the flood of messages underneath of it, which are just like purely hate, very much about my appearance, very much about everything to do with me. And like, that just spreads out and triggers other people. And then someone who's just like, oh my God, I'm going to sit there in my basement and do this. Don't know who they are, probably have never met them, put something together and sends it to a bunch of their buddies and decides to send it to me in a group chat. And then you're just like, oh, that's great. So it's all fueled from somewhere. And I think we, including Liberals, including the NDP, everyone has to tone down some of the way that we're doing these things, because it's allowing a subsect of the population to think that it's okay to use words, names, language, and actions that are not acceptable and that should not be acceptable.
Yeah, there's a lot of people calling for government action on this, and I know that this is something that obviously has been an issue. We've been talking about, like, online harms with your friend Supriya Dwivedi for some time. She advised the Prime Minister on this kind of thing, and I know that in different parts of the world, different federal governments have been taking looks at that sort of a thing. I would imagine, to state the obvious, your personal experience would probably fuel your conviction on that front.
And we've got to remind, I would say, and Supriya's done a really good job, and she's been talking about this a lot, because she used to get a lot of hate when she was doing, before she went to Ottawa, like a lot of hate from people on radio and all these things, and in a way that's not acceptable. And the one thing I hear a lot from people in government is why they're afraid to go even harder on this is because they like to draw a line between freedom of speech and freedom of expression versus hate. And listen, if I was an elected official, it would be as clear as light to me that there is a mass difference between hate speech and free speech. And if we as thought leaders and politicians can't draw that line in the ground, like, hard, and say this falls on one side versus the other, then we're losing the plot and this is going to continue. So whatever it is that we need people to do, I don't want to hear from government officials, oh, we don't want to overregulate or we don't want to over censor people. There's a difference. Like a lot, listen, my shell is so hard. I'm really good at taking it. Like I really am. But a lot of people aren't, right? And people have their limits. People have their moments where they can take a lot, but not everyone is able to. Like I've got friends who are just like, they're like, we would honestly like end up in a very different position because not everyone can do it. So that's up to our elected officials. It's up to our law enforcement to be very cognizant that a lot of this lies on them.
And also, just because you're tough doesn't mean you should have to be tough, right? Like if someone can take a punch doesn't mean that we're cool with that person getting punched all the time. You know what I'm saying? No. And for a lot of people, you're tough right up until you're not, right? You're tough. Yeah. I'm not saying you, but you're tough up until a breaking point, and then people go, well, gosh, this was happening forever. Why wasn't anybody doing anything about it?
Totally. And again, like I like to say, I am really good at throwing punches politically. I am not shy. I have a big mouth and probably should not have such a big mouth when it comes to saying certain things.
I disagree.
But I draw the line when it comes to going at people for their appearances or like for anything that would severely impact their mental health or their self-worth and stuff like that. And I think we forget that that is something that's alive and well out there. So you know, we all suck it up and we do it, but we all have our breaking moments. And whether or not I'll ever go back on X, I don't know, maybe not. It just seems to be a place where it's a lot of hate these days.
You should see, Sharan, how many people on here are like, you know, Emily G says in our live chat powered by Park Power says, I've been X free. She says for a number of months, I don't miss it at all. Super Chat Ken says whatever platform allows that kind of content is not a platform that anybody should be on. Dubious says everybody should have abandoned X a long time ago. I mean, there's a lot of people here. Someone was saying, where was it earlier, saying that Threads, what was it? They said Threads, you can like limit comments or something like that. There's a lot of people with a lot to say this morning on here, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just, you know, I think the comment that really jumps out on me there is like the platform that allows this is not a platform anyone should be on. And that's a real issue for X. I mean, you know, I hate to say this, but for a lot of people, when you're making your decisions on legislation or politics or anything else, people are looking at the bottom line, right? And, you know, for Elon Musk, it may be a circumstance where you go, it's bad business for you. It's bad for X's share price. If it develops a reputation where half the population or more just doesn't feel safe on there.
Yeah. And I think you're going to start seeing more of that. I think I'm finally, this is something that a lot of people have been saying to me for a while. It's like, what value is there? And I've thought about it recently and I'm like, you know, there really isn't any value. I share, like, again, like you said, I will often share as a, just kind of as a joke to be like, oh my God, I can't, like, for the 10th time this week, there's people debating what my race is. Or for the 10th time this week, there's people debating like the fact that they want to land an airplane on my face or like whatever the case may be. But I'm like, what value does that bring to my life? Like, if I want to engage with people that I know, I don't need to do it on a space that's just full of hate. I can do it elsewhere. So it's probably something that I'll never go back to because why go to a place that doesn't bring you any joy? And I think there's so many platforms that you can stay connected with your friends, your family, and people out there. And I get a lot of messages from people who watch the various platforms and shows that I do who will reach out to me on those platforms, both positive and negative. And I think it's just a lot less, I would say, nefarious on that type of space.
It's like the Marie Kondo principle. It applies to everything in life. What brings you joy and what doesn't. And if it doesn't bring you joy, get it out.
It's my new motto in life.
All right. Well, listen, for what it's worth, from halfway across the country, we stand with you. We're proud of you. And I appreciate you. I know that, you know, this is probably, I would imagine, a little bit difficult to talk about publicly. I want to release this as a highlight. And, you know, the one thing stopping me, you know, I'm not saying stopping me, we probably still will, but like the comments, you know what I mean? It's almost honestly, like getting.
You know what? I know exactly the comments you're going to get, and they're going to be like, oh my God, cry me a river. And you know what? I don't care. I think that there's a lot of people out there who need to be called out for their bad behavior. And I am on my mission of finding out how and who developed what they did about me. And it's not going to stop me from sharing my 2 cents and talking about things that matter. So you release away, and I will personally take time to look at every single comment on there to defend why it's important that we care about stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people, I mean, I wouldn't say a lot in our chat. There's a few that are kind of the wah kind of idea. And I'm like, listen, dude, if that was your daughter that was being targeted, or your mom or your wife, you think you'd be wah? I don't think so. Just because nobody knows who you are. A lot of people have a lot of hot takes when nobody knows who you are. But when you're a public-facing figure, there's a lot of bullshit that comes with the territory. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about it. I'm proud of you.
You can send a baby bottle with some napkins and a timer for a nap time to every single person who sent you the wham message.
Okay, I love that. That's Sharan Kaur, principal at Navigator, wonderful friend of this show, in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Thanks for doing this, Sharan.
Have a good one.
Yeah, you as well. Real Talkers, I'd love to know where you stand on this. We're gonna leave some time to talk about this later in the episode. I want to get back into our live chat, powered by Park Power. Your takes on Bill 25 and what Alberta's doing with education, and of course your comments. I mean, if for some of you, I know that like in the gut punch kind of a way, this lands with you in the sense that you can relate. Maybe you've been targeted in this way, or you know somebody that has. And you can let us know to talk@ryanjespersen.com, or if you want to leave a comment on the YouTube episode, if you're watching this later, how that has impacted you. I think it's an important conversation for us to have. Johnny, I don't know about you. I feel like, I want to give you some credit. The technical director of this show, there are many times where you and I will be taking a look at a video we might feature on the show, or a quote. Like oftentimes it's Donald Trump, which sort of adds a layer of ambiguity on what's real and what's not. But I'll be honest, man, it feels like at least once a week, for at least a few seconds, I'm duped by a deep fake. Like the technology, the brain behind AI and what people are able to create, the videos people are able to create, absolutely wild. And we're seeing here, some of the darkest sides of that.
Yeah, it's getting better, but I pride myself on being able to see it. It's, certain things, AI still doesn't have some of the hand movement features, just the way people move, the background imagery, glitchiness, overcomplication of like background. Like when you think of like a city street and you're like, why are there so many parked cars? Why are there so many stop signs? So like when I see a video now, it only takes me about 10 seconds, less than that to figure out it's AI. But
that's a long time,
right?
Yeah,
but the scary thing for me, well, it's usually on a phone, right? If I see it on my laptop, I usually know right away. But what I'm saying is, what's scary for me is I know there's younger people and older people, kind of both ends of the age spectrum, that are really susceptible to it. Like my mom sent me a video the other day, and it was just a funny, like, newscasters laughing at a picture of a father who was like missing or something. But I was like, Mom, these newscasters fell off their chairs and then rolled around. Like that doesn't happen. Yeah. First of all, that doesn't happen in real life. And even if it did, like, look at how they move, and it's giving way to it. I know we're trailing off here into AI and how people are susceptible to it, but it's trailing off into people are being duped. People are being scammed.
And in Sharan's
kids are being
people
fooled.
Are being attacked, right?
Yeah, and the easier thing to do now, I mean, forget about Photoshop, Ryan. You can type something in to AI and create a news article that is absolutely fake in 10 seconds.
100% true. My one the other day, I saw there was a video of a guy, a hefty fella, in line at a buffet, loading up his plate. He was wearing his MAGA hat, and the restaurant employee came up and said, "Sir, this has to be your last helping." And he said, "This is all you can eat." He said, "You said this is all you can eat." And she said, "Well, you've had all you can eat." And he says, "I'm out of here." And he throws his plate and walks off. It wasn't until the plate was tossed and none of the food moved on the plate, which was 10 seconds into the video, that I clued in. It was that good. Now, when you're talking about personal attacks, when you're talking about slander, when you're talking about your likeness being used in pornographic imagery, this is sexual harassment, if not sexual assault.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that for a lot of people, I won't say for a lot, I hope not for a lot. I hope that this isn't becoming an issue that we can't get a handle on. But for people, they will soon realize, or they should realize, that there are criminal consequences to this type of thing.
Yeah, and it's not just, I know Canada, a lot of people say Canada is like they're trying to put a muzzle on us over here, but I like our laws. Like, first of all, go back to the food thing. AI does not get past it yet. Like when you see people eating spaghetti, I know immediately it's AI. But not to joke around, we're talking serious here, but threats of violence and sexual assault, which I see all the time on X. I see it on Facebook too. Heck, I even see it on Instagram sometimes. But Instagram and Facebook are quick to remove things. Well, quicker than places like X and other places. But, threats of violence and sexual assault, that's a crime. That's not trolling. People are like, oh, you got to have thicker skin, blah, blah, blah. When somebody says you should be raped, when somebody says you should, even when they say like a plane should land on your head, like this isn't funny stuff. And when people say, oh, get thicker skin, go to blue sky, go somewhere safe, find a safe space, blah, blah, blah. I agree with you 100%. It's all fun and games until it's a member of your family, till it's your kid, till it's your mom, till it's your friend, your uncle, your brother, whatever, till somebody docks you as a private citizen, puts your address, phone number, personal information online, or takes a picture of you and makes it pornographic. Like it shouldn't be allowed at all.
Yeah. And I think that it's incredible that Sharon's willing to speak about it publicly. I think that that's really important. I think that it's obviously brutal. And she's like, let me just reiterate, if you follow her on Instagram, you know this already. Like she has shared a lot of the comments, like just like the tip of the iceberg. And she typically laughs them off and presents them as almost like satire. They're so ridiculous, but it's obviously something that would take a toll day after day after day. I think it's something that's really important that we talk about, right? Joker says you should be able to request comments be removed. I guess that those days are gone. Maybe. I mean, you can often delete comments, but at the same time, like you don't want to put it on the recipient all the time. And second of all, if it's comments in the dozens or the hundreds, what are you going to do about it, right? Neil is watching us, says, I advocate for people getting off X. She says, I tried to convince Ryan to get off X a while ago. Dubious says, it's easy for a platform to build a safe environment. X just doesn't want to do that. But he goes on, Dubious goes on to say, by the way, as an indie journalist, we can't all just abandon every platform, right? That limits our reach, which is what Elon Musk wants for progressives. Marie says, I use the block button on Facebook all the time. Tony says, I just deactivated my X account. Tony, I think Tony maybe means while she's watching the show. She says, I feel so much better. And Miss Katie is absolutely right. Says, Sharon is the total package.
The algorithm on X is so much faster than the other platforms I've just noticed. And it's so much more, I mean, I'll use the word vile. It's crazy. So I only log on X. I'm going to tell you, I log on in the morning to see just basically the highlights, like what's trending, because, usually what's trending is still applicable to the show. A lot of it has to do with politics, news, etc., people passing away. But like, if you go to the Reels feed and start going, it is wild. Yesterday, I just clicked on someone's status. Like they posted, I told you about this, Alan Richter, the Jack Reacher actor, got into a scuffle outside of his house with his kids.
Right,
with
the
a
motorcycle
neighbor.
crash.
And there was an assault that happened.
It was wild.
So I clicked on that video, and then I scrolled up, and it's like, all these people that are being labeled as Karens, like other people, neighbors fighting. And then by the time I'm like 5 reels down, I'm seeing like, police officer assaults on civilians. And then some of these audit guys in the US who basically go around videotaping everyone until somebody assaults them and then suing. Like the rabbit hole went in like 6 reels to like something I had no interest in.
Yeah.
And that was a bit jarring and annoying and aggravating to me. Whereas you go on Instagram, it's a little better, but you know what I mean? You're getting more of what you want, more that is a positive feeling. But X just drags you down a hole really fast and
brings
gets you
us
upset.
Back to our March 13th interview with Dr. Caroline Bazanko talking about kids and young people and exposure to social media and screen times. And, you're a critically thinking pre-middle-aged guy.
Careful.
Pre-middle-aged. But you're a critical thinker. and you have a tuned eye. It's part of your job. It's part of what qualifies you for your job. When you think of like 8-year-olds or 11-year-olds or 15 or 17 or 21-year-olds that are exposed to this type of thing, that don't recognize how an algorithm works, that don't recognize the table that's being set in front of young people and what they're being fed, it's no wonder. We talk, I mentioned, and we got to get, by the way, we have a digital risk segment, a feature coming up here in like 5 minutes with our buddies at North Road Investment Counsel. They offer this service. They're a wonderful partner of the show. And we talk to you oftentimes about their digital risk advisory services. This is like perfect timing. Now, they're not necessarily talking about deep fakes specifically, but the entire landscape has changed. The entire 100%. Game has changed. And, and I think that it's so important. I mentioned I spoke to these grade 6 students. It was a wonderful honor a few weeks ago. I went and chatted with them. They wanted to talk about journalism and talk shows and all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
I spent probably 10 minutes talking to them about media literacy and talking to them about how we have to be able to recognize and understand what are valid or legitimate or credible sources and what makes a source lack credibility. I think it's so important that kids are taught this early.
I agree with you. As someone who puts themselves way down the ladder of people who you just called me a critical thinker. We have people on this show who are levels above me of that. But I go on every day, and like I just said, AI. Like people are creating. I'll just tell you one I saw the other day. It was Rudolph Giuliani and Piers Morgan were on his show debating about I don't know. Rudolph Giuliani was going off about how there's a Muslim invasion of people in the UK, et cetera, et cetera. And then underneath, somebody had posted an article that was clearly AI. I could tell right off the hop that said 60% of the population in London was now Muslim or something like that. And it's an easy Google search to see that 5% of the UK is Muslim. The overwhelming majority of London and the UK as a whole are white Christian Catholics. It's just, but underneath this article was 171,000 likes and over 2,000 comments that were like, we need to take our country back, blah, blah, blah.
It reiterates what people already think.
This
right?
is what
confirmation bias.
People don't even want to know the truth anymore. They want to see what reflects their opinion. They want to comment it. They want to share it. They don't want to research to see if it's real.
Yeah. I appreciate this comment from Jillian. Says, when women like me talk about feminism and rights, remember folks say we're equal and those battles are over. She's got the eye roll emoji. Nia says the amount of time that these trolls spend thinking about Sharan, the best thing she could do is not think about them at all. They don't matter. They're insignificant. She says she should keep up the good work. And I agree, Nia, to a certain extent, except it's slapping her in the face and it's finding its way into her DMs. And, it's
she's spicy. Like she doesn't take shit. Sorry to swear. You know what I mean? There's my one to show. But like she fires back at people, right? But when somebody hurls an insult at you and you throw one back, which most of the time I see hers, they aren't bad. They're just, she's kind of just busting balls or whatever. And then someone says you should be, unalived. Like it just goes way too far, way too quick. There's no room for like debate or even a bit of rat-a-tat, like back and forth. People just immediately go to, and all those accounts you see, I don't even know if they're real people, especially on X. There's no real photo. The usernames are crazy. It could be bots.
Agreed. Tracy D says Sharan being targeted can loosely be compared to our first topic out of the gates today, in the sense that it's being suggested that all of Alberta's teachers are doing something they're not. Yeah. We're going to get to your comments on that, on Bill 25, and more on this. We'll keep that conversation going.
I mean, I know we got to go, but what do you think of it? Right, just your opinion.
Of what? Of what's happening to Sharan?
No, of the bill.
Oh, of Bill 20? Yeah, I'll get to it.
Okay.
I'll get to it. But I want to get to the digital risk advisory, and then we'll leave lots of time for talk, because I want to get. I'll tell you what I think. I mean, I'm
just interested on your initial thoughts, because we haven't talked about it.
Yeah, I've got lots of thoughts on it, and actually, my thoughts on it are ranging.
Okay.
Like, for example,
because you're a father.
Yeah, but my thoughts on limiting the flags. or my thoughts on limiting taking politics and ideology out of classrooms. I think that part's laughable. I'm going to save it though. I'm going to keep my powder dry. But then the O Canada thing. The O Canada thing is throwing me for a loop.
I don't mind it. We
I
sung
love
O Canada
the O
every
Canada
day
thing.
in high school.
It's
I don't think it's a bad thing.
But I don't think it. But don't let anybody. Hey, I'm using all my good material. I should save it for later in the show. But let me say this: don't let anybody present this as the Alberta government wrapping itself in the Canadian flag. I think that they're using O Canada as a tool to send a message to people that are criticizing them as an anti-Canadian government. I actually think that, and I know that some people will think I'm a conspiracy theorist, but it's an interesting, because if you look at it, damn it, Johnny, I was supposed to save this, but if you look at it, you're throwing a bone to a certain group.
Of course.
By saying no. They're not saying no pride flags, but they're saying no pride flags. They're not saying no Palestinian flags, but they're saying no Palestinian.
One flag
right? They're not
rules them all.
Right. They're saying it without saying it.
Yeah.
And so that satiates these people. But those same people are going to be really pissed off that kids are saying. Now, I'll tell you what, if this bill included removing O Canada from classrooms or limiting O Canada to once a week, then you would have, then the shit would really hit the fan. But I think it's an interesting one, and we will get there. I want to get to our friends at North Road Investment Counsel while we're talking about Sharan's experience and the bigger picture around digital risk and the changing landscape. Misha and Marshall are going to join us from North Road Investment Counsel in just a moment. Our partnership with them includes a focus on digital risk advisory. And for a lot of you, I'll let them put it in their own words, but when you're thinking of your investment advisor, you're probably not thinking of them covering your butt on digital risk, but that's what they're doing at North Road. That in just a moment. It is Wednesday, of course. It's hump day, and every Wednesday, courtesy of our friends at Tourism Jasper, we have an opportunity to share some MyJasper memories, to talk to you about the incredible memories that people are making out in Canada's crown jewel, that is Jasper National Park. And right now, I want to let you know what's happening at Marmot Basin. Now, you can always check out skimarmot.com for live snow reports. You can check out their webcams. And right now, if you're looking at skimarmot.com, you're going to notice something phenomenal, and that is that it is still snowing out there. I know it's not phenomenal if you're in the heart of the city and you're hoping for spring and you're ready for your daffodils and your tulips to start popping up, but if you're looking to get in a few more rips there, bud, before the season ends, you'll be thrilled to know that they've got 16 centimeters of fresh over the last 4 days, 55 centimeters, half a meter, everybody, a half a meter of fresh powder at Marmot Basin at the beginning of April. That's absolutely amazing. The snow base on top of the existing snow base, 154 centimeters. So these are prime spring conditions, and a reminder that kids are still skiing free Monday through Friday. There's no small print. There's no strings attached. Kids are skiing for free Monday to Friday at Marmot Basin. Absolutely fantastic. Now, they do have a really cool event coming up, and that's their SkiiTour slope party. I don't know if you've heard of this high-energy duo SkiiTour, but absolutely amazing. An exclusive live performance coming up on April 25th. This duo out of Whistler, known for their upbeat, feel-good house music, intertwined with ski culture and retro flair. They're going to keep the vibe groovy. And partnered with Corona Canada, they're going to bring that groovy vibe to Marmot for one big bash before the end of the season. So you can join the Mid-Mountain. There's nothing like the Mid-Mountain Lodge at Marmot Basin. They've got the bonfires going there, live entertainment, pop-ups, and more. That is the Après Ski Tour, the sound to your après. It's going to be an amazing party. That's the slope party coming up April 25th, only at Marmot Basin. You can get your details there at skimarmot.com. And a reminder, if all the snowfall is inspiring you to get your family out to Marmot, or maybe you're going to be Employer of the Year and take your team out. Marshall McAlister from North Road's listening to me say this, and I'm making eye contact with him, and I wonder if he'll take his team out there. We'll see. If you want to impress your team, if you want to surprise your family, maybe it's an anniversary, maybe it's a celebration, you can always book at jasper.travel. It's the cabin capital of Canada. The culinary offerings, second to none. There is nothing like memories made in Jasper. Again, that's jasper.travel to book your Jasper getaway. Skimarmot.com for the updated Snow report, those ski conditions, remarkable for April 1st. MyJasper Memories is proudly presented on Real Talk by our friends at Tourism Jasper. It is always a real treat to welcome in our friends from North Road Investment Counsel to the Real Talk studio here in the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton. The audience knows that we're proud to partner with North Road Investment Counsel and Marshall. It's nice to have you back, and you've brought a team member to join us to talk about something in particular, digital risk.
Today, I am joined by none other than our digital risk advisor, Misha Niemtsev. Been proud to have him service our clients in this very unique space in which we are operating our investment counsel firm. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about this today.
Yeah,
right?
we sure are. And I think, and Misha, welcome to the show. You're making your Real Talk debut. You know, that means you get to walk out of here with a Real Talk coffee mug. That's the official rite of passage for your first appearance.
What about the socks?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? If we have a pair of socks left, we've just placed a new order.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, these are for our Patreon supporters, you know, as well, right?
Yeah.
And the team at Sock Rocket down in Calgary is doing that for us. We buy our socks Canadian. We make sure to buy our socks Canadian. But if you see a pair, you make sure you snag them. To be serious, that conversation with Sharan Kaur, I know that the both of you were in the green room and you were hearing her talk about that, and it's shocking on one hand to hear a person in plain language talk about their individual and their real life experience, and it's also not surprising if we're taking a look at the world around us and how much the landscape has changed in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Our firm launched in 2022, 2023, and for the last 10 years, we've been noticing the issues and risks around life online is becoming more dangerous. And we get a window into many hundreds of lives, and the lives that we watch, we're indexing to more successful people, and we're noticing that these successful families are getting hurt by criminals and the behavior of not only Canadians, but international criminals trying to steal money and steal identity. And we've created a program to get in the way, Ryan.
So, Misha, when we're talking about digital risks, what are we talking about here? Is it like cyber attacks, misinformation, misuse of AI? Is it all of the above?
Correct. It's all included. We're speaking about the theft of identity, so how to protect your identity and how do you expose yourself online? So what are you sharing with the world and how it can be used against you? How to secure your digital systems. We're all digitally connected. We do our online banking. We do our banking online. We live online nowadays, and nobody really knows how to secure those systems. And this is where we come in, where we offer guidance on how to secure those systems and be safe online.
So you are, this is like your full-time job, Misha,
Correct.
right? Like your digital risk advisory services, that's what you do full-time. Do you see, regardless of who you're working with, do you see consistent blind spots? Like, are there a couple of things that almost all of us are doing wrong or not doing?
Yes, correct. So we don't know what we don't know. And often the smarter the people I work with, the more critical vulnerabilities they're exposed to, because they rely on their critical thinking, and because they've been so successful in their profession and they're experts in their own field, they often feel like they're above digital risk until they get to sit down with me, and 10, 15 minutes later, the faces slowly start to change, and they realize what the actual risk is and how it can hurt them.
Do you must have seen some scenarios where folks, whether they're kind of your average ordinary person or the high net worth individuals with more financially to lose, or in many cases for very prominent or public people, reputational damage that can result. Sometimes folks learn the lesson when either it's too late or some of the damage has been done.
Yeah. So Ryan, we do want to talk about the reputational risks that can connect into professions, that can connect into our children's lives in junior high and high school. One picture, one missed post can destroy a life. And a part of Misha's job is hanging out with Gen 2 and sometimes Gen 3 to talk about just better behavior online, and just another reminder that it's not always about money. And the risk connected to money, it can be sometimes even more important than that.
So do you think that, does the average person just not feel like it's going to happen to them? I mean, I feel like some of the basics, I'm trying to think of the most basic protections, which would be like two-factor identification on your devices or on your social media channels. And for a lot of people, it may seem like a hassle, something that they don't want to do because a lot of people don't think that they're going to be targeted.
Correct. Yeah, I often hear the phrase that I'm not important enough. And hackers or scammers, they're not really targeting important people. They're targeting easy targets, meaning they just pick up the lowest hanging fruit. And most of us, when we do not have guidance, are the easy targets. Yeah.
So where do you begin? Like, I'll point people to northroadic.com, and you can learn more about what sets North Road apart. And they've got these 4 pillars, the 4 different service business units. We talk a lot about the investment counsel, the financial planning, and the insurance, but people will find digital risk advisory there. Mm-hmm. Does it begin with almost an audit? People can take the quiz online, northroadic.com, but where does your work begin, Misha?
Yeah, I sit down with clients and I do an assessment. So I ask them a range of questions to spot vulnerabilities, something they're not aware of. And I like approaching it from the 80-20% rule, which represents that 20% of your actions are responsible for 80% of the results. And my job is to spot this 20% and help them fix the most critical vulnerabilities first. So they can leave. So their quality of life doesn't get disrupted if something big happens.
Pardon me while I talk about you while you're sitting here at the table. Mm-hmm. Does it make sense, or is it imperative that you have, relatively speaking, a younger member of your team on this file?
Well, here's the thing. I have been fortunate that I get to show up in an office where I'm surrounded by people that are smarter on technology than I am. Okay, so I'm getting close to 50, and I can you feel technology kind of getting away on us, Ryan? I've been
feeling it for years, Marsh.
Right? So if I'm feeling it in my 40s, what are my clients and our clients feeling it in their 60s and 70s as they leave the workforce, no longer have the IT support services, the pal down the office that can quickly help them? So what we thought about with our firm is, like, if we could come up with a consulting service that can be a resource for our valuable clients. And it's not just a one-time check-in and a report. It's a relationship, because our life with technology is not going to stop, and it's not going to not evolve. Right, Misha? Correct. Like it's a constantly changing thing. And the vectors of attack are also continually changing. So having somebody that's wicked smart like Misha Niemtsev is a really, really great asset for our clients and for our firm.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to sound sort of like ageist, and I know people will criticize me. I know that there are people in the latter stages of their life, I'm sure, that are very technically literate and they understand their digital presence is dialed in, but that's not necessarily me. And it feels like kind of the next generation coming up. You know, you're entering like the prime of your career, but to me it just seems to be almost an advantage, Misha, that you would have, for all intents and purposes, almost grown up around the stuff. It's been part of your awareness and what's prepared you for the job in the first place. Correct.
Yeah, the threat landscape is evolving very quickly, and I study after work, and even I'm behind on some things that I'm interested in. So cybersecurity field is moving very quickly, and a lot of the vulnerable people in our society, like elderly, are often left behind because they already have a hard time grasping technology as is, not even speaking about the threats from other countries.
Are you guys seeing like deep fakes, like what Sharan was talking about? I mean, in that sense, obviously the gut punch is that it was like a sexually invasive, or, you know, sort of almost, it was basically an attack in the most personal way possible on that front. But when it comes to like financial scams, when it comes to people being taken, you hear these horrible stories of people that have transferred, you know, in some cases hundreds of thousands of dollars and being taken. Are we seeing like deep fakes or synthetic media that's being used in real financial scams that are targeting clients?
Yeah, we are. So I can't tell you a specific example of the deep fake that's potentially hurt our clients. So I have heard of a client that was called by a grandchild asking for funds, and it wasn't them, but I'm not sure if that was AI generated or just a scammer.
Right.
But Ryan, we are seeing people's identities stolen and loans taken out in names from criminals. We've seen funds stolen. We've seen romance scams. We've seen just general fraud where somebody thought that they were helping somebody raise money for a gift, and it was Amazon cards going to somewhere totally different.
Yeah, we've reiterated this. We talked to Julie Matthews. She's like a scam buster, does a great job, comes on like once a year with us, and she's reiterated. I mean, I almost chuckle when I say it, but it's not funny. But she's like, the CRA will never ask you to pay an amount owing in gift cards. Yeah. Like, it's like basic principles like that. Have you ever, in the course of a digital risk audit or working with a client at North Road, have you ever intercepted something like almost in real time? Have you ever seen a red flag right there in front of you and said, oh my gosh, it's happening like as we speak?
Well, we were lucky enough not to have experienced it with our clients because we do a lot of education on social engineering, and we teach security codes. So letting people create secret phrases they can exchange with their family members in case there is a strange request for money comes in. An interesting story I just remembered, a few months ago I was at a corner store purchasing something, and I mentioned what I do for a living to the clerk, and he just told me that he got scammed out of $30,000 or $40,000 for an investment scam. And from asking him a few questions, it was clear that there was AI involved. He was thinking that he was investing in a real opportunity, and I had to be honest with him that this money cannot be recovered, and doing what he already done, reporting it to the police, is the only thing that was in his power. But the mistake was already made, and money was already out of the country.
Oh my gosh. I'll read what Real Talkers are doing. They're engaged on this one in our live chat powered by Park Power. Meta Modern says, do not click on links that are texted to you, please. Jonathan says, gosh, it helps to have a techie guy to keep you aware of scams and the like, of course. Peter says that he's had a cyber threat saying that they had video of him watching porn from his webcam. He says, I don't have a webcam. Others are presenting tips on multi-factor authentication. Boomshanker X says, don't store that in the same password manager as all of your passwords. Another interesting one here, tech can address certain attack vectors, but online behavior is the biggest vulnerability. You're nodding your head, Misha.
Yeah, that is very correct. So the weakest link in most security systems is the human. I've seen people with very good computers, even cybersecurity professionals who are putting very expensive software, and it's always the human that gets to be compromised. Clicking on something, interacting with something where there's a sense of urgency, this is where we get caught most of the time. And yeah, education and awareness is the only thing that can prevent that. In fact, I see a lot of complacency with security because people rely on their security, on their technology too much, and they leave the awareness and the education aside because they feel like their computers are protecting them.
Was this like for you, Marshall, in your own personal life? You and leading the team at North Road Investment Counsel, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that not every investment firm, not every investment advisory firm is offering this service. What was it that sort of created that conviction within you that this needed to be a pillar of what your team offers?
Right. I think getting back to the idea that we get a window into many lives and we're seeing how significant the risks and the dangers are. And I can just tell you, like, according to the Canadian Centre for Fraud, I'm getting the acronym or the name wrong, but it's the institute in Canada that measures what the risks and the losses are for fraud. And Ryan, these numbers are totaling, reported at $650 million in 2024.
Jeez.
This is larger than the gross revenue that the Edmonton Oilers bring in on an annual basis. So everything that they're doing, selling tickets, beers, popcorn, the entire thing it's bigger than that. Now, Misha, we know that most people that are impacted by these types of scams actually don't report it because in our society, it has been brought about that it's a bit embarrassing because you think you've been duped, right? Which is a problem. So this same center is saying that it's likely 10 to 20 times bigger than the reported amount. 10 to 20 times. So if we think about that, now, the Edmonton Oilers is like one of the
10 to 20 times.
20 to 20
Let
times.
that sit for a second. That's wild.
Yeah, it's big numbers now. In the
$6 billion.
It's in the so the Edmonton Oilers have been valued at about $4.4 billion. It's one of the most valuable sports franchise sports franchises in the world, right? Canadian fraud losses are like the Edmonton Oilers franchise every year, potentially.
Every year,
gone. And people are getting hurt in a major way from this.
Okay, so Misha, obviously the number one takeaway, you can check out, by the way, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center online. You just Google Canadian Anti-Fraud Center, you'll find it. And obviously, if you want to connect with the team at North Road Investment Counsel, take their digital risk quiz. There's no obligation. You can connect with their team. You can book an appointment and talk about, your susceptibility, your vulnerability, and address it by visiting northroadic.com. We'll link to it in the show notes. But let's give Real Talkers a couple of things to take away today. What are a couple of things that everybody can do today, right now, to lessen their digital risk?
Of course, I think the first step would be the most simple one is enable multi-factor authentication on all critical accounts. And what are critical accounts is your email, your banking, obviously, any financial investment account, your social media, your CRA account that has been a big target the past few years. So I would secure those with multi-factor. I would use strong and unique passwords. The advice on passwords have been changing the past few years. Complexity is becoming less of importance as the length of the password.
Oh, really?
Sticking 3, 4, 5 words together with a special character seems to be preventing much more brute forcing attacks than the complexity of them. It's impossible to remember your passwords, especially if they're all unique. So use a password manager. That's a very, very simple solution towards that. A lot of our systems are already coming included with password managers, so you just have to learn how to use them. And very important, update your devices. I keep seeing clients who feel very secure, yet they're using computers that are 10, 15, 20 years old, and they're no longer receiving security updates. And those are critical for your security. It should not be neglected.
I got a really interesting comment here from Ken, who says if you're still on Windows 10, you're increasingly vulnerable. He says there are no more security updates for Windows 10.
So that is very correct. So I believe in October they have made an announcement that Windows 10 systems are only going to be supported for 1 more year, and I believe in the next 6 to 10 months, all of those systems that cannot be updated to Windows 11 software are going to be very, very exposed to hackers, and they will no longer be updated. So I would recommend all the viewers check your devices, go in your system settings and see what is the current update level, and more often than not, you'll have to go and purchase a new computer to upkeep with these changes.
How about this from Marie? Says, I had a call saying that my grandson was in jail and needed bail. I let them know my grandson was 3 months old at the time. So there you go. That one fell flat. Lucky for Marie. We got a lot of. What about this one from Aaron, Misha? Aaron says, our IT guy told us to never, ever use public Wi-Fi. She says, I asked if a VPN would be fine. He said it's better, but it could also be hacked very easily. Says hotspot your phone.
That is very accurate. Public Wi-Fi should not be trusted for anything. In fact, I recommend our clients to only use their data on their phone, and if they want to connect back to the internet, wait until you go home to a network that you own. It could either be a misconfigured network, meaning whoever set it up had no idea what they're doing, or it can be a malicious actor that replicates the signal and wants you to connect to their free Wi-Fi.
Okay, so if you're in the departures lounge at the airport and you want to catch up on your online banking using the public Wi-Fi, that is a boneheaded move.
Big no-no. And the data plans are so cheap nowadays, there's no reason to connect to public Wi-Fi. It was more understandable 10 years ago when they were charging quite a lot, but right now most data plans are either unlimited or they're very, very generous where you'll never hit the limit. So especially when you're traveling, you can use your data plan as much as you can anytime you leave the country.
Hey, Misha, what about on an airplane, getting the free Wi-Fi on WestJet or?
Yeah, so I recommend avoiding it unless you have absolutely no choice, but I would absolutely never connect to your work systems, meaning I would never connect to our North Road systems to check up on a client profile, just because you're in such a closed space, and security is not the biggest priority for companies who are offering Wi-Fi. They're prioritizing usability. So they want convenience. So they don't want you to be disconnected. They don't want your Wi-Fi to be slow. And any security system that you set up on a network often makes it slower. This is why they're often skipped and just neglected.
Great follow-up question there, Marshall, by the way.
Thanks, man.
Very well done. I'm like, you're like, but what about when you get on the plane? I'm like, right. This is when I pull my hoodie down and fall asleep. Hey, guys, I want to thank you for putting this on our radar. The timing of this in the context of what Sharan was talking to us as well. I think that this is going to be on people's radar today, and they're going to be looking for direction, some great takeaway tips for you here, and then also the resource available with the team at North Road Investment Counsel. You can find them online anytime at northroadic.com. Just click on the digital risk banner. You'll find that digital risk quiz. It's a great way to at least get an early sense of where the vulnerabilities may be. And then, of course, you can book a consultation with Misha, with Marshall, and the team at North Road Investment Counsel. We're proud to partner with you guys. We appreciate the monthly check-ins. And I get the sense, I mean, if this even saves one person a huge headache, absolutely worth the time. Thanks for making time for us.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, you got it. That's Marshall McAlister and Misha Niemtsev. Did I do okay? Niemtsev, awesome. Great to meet you. Hell of a job on your debut. Make sure you get him a pair of socks there in the front door. Okay. NorthroadIC.com is where you can learn more. The conversation will continue in just a moment on digital risk. We want to talk about AI. I want to get back to Bill 25, the Alberta government's new legislation when it comes to schools. And I know Real Talkers have a lot to say about that. Before we do, how about a message from the Alberta Teachers Association? I'm talking about progressnotpromises.ca. You know, when 51,000 people spoke up for Alberta's students, what did the government do? When 51,000 teachers were out of the classroom this past fall, they suspended their charter rights to collective bargaining, made it harder for Alberta's teachers to speak out for what students need at school. They did it by invoking the notwithstanding clause, and they didn't have to. And Alberta's teachers want you to know that the government had other options. And that's why the Alberta Teachers Association is taking the government to court to get teachers' rights restored. They're not going to stop advocating for students because it shouldn't be wrong to speak up for kids. You can learn more at progressnotpromises.ca. This is a message from the Alberta Teachers Association. If you're looking at post-secondary plans over the next year or so, could be over the next couple of months, you know you do not have to wait until September to get started at Athabasca University. That's because the courses, the hundreds of them, world-class accredited online degrees and courses, are designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. That's all part of the AU Advantage. You benefit from the AU's commitment to flexible study options, accessibility for students around the world, personalized learning plans, and of course, a supportive community. And that's just the beginning of the AU Advantage. There are student resources, financial supports. You can learn more, or even if you're feeling gung-ho about it, apply now by visiting athabascau.ca. Hey, have you figured out your Easter plans yet? If you're going to be hosting family or friends and you'd rather spend quality time catching up as opposed to mashing potatoes until they're just perfect in the kitchen, may we humbly suggest cateringbyfriesen.com. Let Friesen Brothers handle your Easter dinner with their classic Easter dinner box, $99 for 4 people. You're not going to do any better than that, even if you are doing all the work. They've got their vegan Easter dinner box as well. You can feed 2. Make Easter simple and satisfying. Just $55 for 2. If you're feeding 20, just order 10 of them. And then, of course, they have their signature Easter meal. This is our personal favorite. This is the one we get every single year. Again, at cateringbyfriesen.com. The signature Easter meal, a stress-free holiday meal for 6 for $2.39 plus GST. You pop it in the oven, you heat it up, and you serve it. It's that simple. You can order through till April 9th at cateringbyfriesen.com. And for those of you anywhere near the Metro Edmonton region, you know how proud we are to be members of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. It's one of our business's most valuable investment for a number of different reasons, including the networking opportunities and knowing that as a small business concerned about our bottom line, the Chamber is advocating for us each and every day. I sure appreciate the opportunities to connect with fellow Chamber members, and that includes the events coming up in the month of April. You can check them all out at the Edmonton Chamber's website. That's edmontonchamber.com. They had Alberta's finance minister in a couple of weeks ago, and they've got, coming up on the 2nd of April, that's going to be Thursday of this week, a roundtable with the Alberta NDP. That's their economic policy dialogue. You can register today. Get your tickets at edmontonchamber.com. A shout out, by the way, to everybody that attended the Chamber's first annual Bonspiel. Looked like it was an incredible success, and a big shout out, Johnny, to our pal QP, Quinn Phillips, whose team took top honors at the inaugural Edmonton Chamber Bonspiel.
Shout out to Erica, our newest Real Talk member.
I saw that.
Head over to YouTube, check out our homepage, click join, select level of membership. Our second and third tier get access to our newly improved and way more organized.
Our Discord is so good.
Discord members only chat, which we are now hearing because of this segment from our friends at Northwest or North Road Financial, should have a tech section to talk about all this stuff about emerging
that's a
AI
great idea.
and scams and stuff like
That's
that.
a really great idea. Yeah, I can show you here. This is the only screen that I'll show with the Real Talk community chat. That's on Discord. And this is a benefit for all of our Patreon supporters, our Real Deal and our Real VIP supporters as well. This is the On the Record page, which is where participants can submit comments to be read on the record or on the show. It's just another way to engage with us. But of course, this conversation happens 24/7. And then there's a bunch of kind of insider comments that they have. It's basically the Real Talk live chat 24/7
Pet chat
on our community chat. The pet chat is so fun. Do you think anybody would care if I should? No one's going to care if I show the pet chat. Look at this. Everybody shared everybody shared their pet photos. This is super cool. I love that. Hey, so you put me on the spot, which is fair game and fair play.
Let me get you on the main camera
about
here.
Alberta's about Bill 25 and removing politics and ideology
Pick
out
it
of school.
apart.
But I'm curious to pick your brain on it. I want to get back to what Real Talkers have to say about it. There's parts of it that, to be honest with you, I don't mind. And this is the case with a lot of the legislation. I think some of it is a little bit, probably, I would say, laughable in the sense that when you're using politics to get politics out of classrooms, it's a bit of a joke and deserves to be called as much. But some of the stuff I love and or at least I'm intrigued by from a political strategy, like as a nerd and a geek on politics. I love the O Canada thing because it's just this little inclusion that just creates a whole other talking point about where the Alberta government stands on the province's future in Canada. You don't introduce legislation demanding O Canada once a week if you're getting set to leave Canada, or at least that's what they want you to think.
I was saving that because I was like, I want to say this. The funny thing is I go on X, the vile X, crazy tornado of disaster. And what do I see this morning? People championing Danielle Smith and the bill with literally Independent Alberta in their username. And in this bill, it says we're going to sing "O Canada" every day, but you want to separate for it blows my mind. But before you go and take each section and tell me what you like and don't like, here's what I'll say. It's a bit of a Trojan horse, and I think we all see that, right? There are things in here that everyone's like, yeah, this is great. We should I don't know how you take all politics out of school. You got to teach political science. You got to teach people about government and what's going on in the news daily, day to day with everything that's going on, U.S., Canada, around the world. So how do you do that without talking about politics? That's kind of like confusing to me. But yeah, to get the partisan out of there, to have it be mainline down the middle, I think that's fine. To have O Canada every day in school, that's no different than when I was in school.
I think most schools are doing that already. Yeah.
But there's the Trojan horse is all the other things that are littered in there that I'm like, this is a bit too much.
Yeah, and I just like for me, kind of the big picture here is I'm not sure that and I know that people have different opinions on this. I've engaged with some people online that have sort of pushed back on this when we've talked about ideology in schools, and obviously this flared up. What was it, 6-8 weeks ago, something like that, when that the right wing grifter had released video that he had encouraged people. It was audio, but it was like someone captured on their phone, a student captured on their phone of this social studies teacher, a high school social studies teacher, which actually gave you one of your signature lines here on Real Talk moving forward. I'm
going to Real Talkers, We're gonna give a mug to whoever.
You pay the shipping.
Okay.
We'll give a mug.
I'll give you my mug if you can come up with the quote that I said for a week straight on this show.
Yeah, and it's actually become one of your signature lines. We might stamp it onto a hoodie, but this high school teacher that I actually felt sick for the high school teacher. I don't know them personally, but they had like something taken out of context. You guys can imagine all the tomfoolery on this show. If you took 15, 30, 40 seconds out of something that I say when I'm on some big rant characterizing the stereotypes around individual political
parties. I'm surprised
parties.
it hasn't happened yet where someone hasn't made a montage of just little pieces of sentences put together.
We're just assigning them to do that now. They can
yeah.
comb through and put something together, right, that misrepresents kind of what I'm all about. But basically, this teacher was portrayed as this like hardcore anti-conservative left wing, reiterating all the stereotypes around people
me
that
no
would vote for
happy
the
if me no rich.
Yeah, who won the mug? Did somebody win the mug?
Meta-modern.
All right, there you go. Meta-modern. There you go. They got to send Johnny an email, attack@RyanJespersen.com. But
Don't give my
now you're going to get added to a bunch of mailing
Talk at Ryan
lists.
Jespersen.
People do that to me all the time, by the way.
That.
You want to talk about people being targeted for online harassment? I'm being glib here for a second. I oftentimes, I would say once a week, we tell you all the time, send us an email, talk@RyanJespersen.com. You know the address. We hope it's drilled in. Whether it's the same person doing it all the time or different people, they sign us up for these ridiculous mailing lists, and so we
I don't
unsubscribe.
envy you going through your inbox.
Shout out to Katie, the saint of our operation, our general manager, Katie, she's the one that's got to unsubscribe from all the bullshit. But in all seriousness, this teacher kind of taken out of context, I would argue. But the point is, and we're not here to relitigate that situation, but the premise was that all the teachers, or like every teacher, is this left-wing ideologue that's dragging conservatives, that's making the students' parents look stupid or ignorant if they voted conservative, and the government's got to step in to stop this trend of these like left-wing progressive activists that are, trying to turn kids trans. I mean, if you take your understanding of what's actually happening from comments on social media, that is what you would believe is happening here. And so I think that this legislation is designed to satisfy the people that feel that schools have turned into this sort of like this ideologue factory where young kids are being counseled to vote progressive, to vote federally liberal, to vote NDP, to oppose conservative policy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what I think kind of the general premise of it is. You always have to ask, with government legislation or any sort of action, what is the problem that this is endeavoring to solve? And is it a real problem? Is it a real issue? Now, I do think that Alberta's teachers right now, generally speaking, are at odds with this provincial government, and that it's not a healthy relationship. That's obvious. Yeah. And we'll talk to the education minister just after Easter. Minister Nicolaides is going to be on the show next week. Naheed Nenshi, official opposition leader, will be on the show tomorrow. That's going to be our final show before the Easter break. So we're going to get two sides of the story there, and I'm curious to see what they'll both say about this. If you have a question you'd like me to ask either of them, you can submit it, to talk@RyanJespersen.com. Please don't sign us up for any nefarious or weird mailing lists. So what is the problem that they're trying to solve here, and is that a real issue? Is that a real problem? That's the conversation or the debate that we can have. I do acknowledge that right now the teachers, now they're also professionals, right? So just because a teacher may have had hard feelings, and maybe that doesn't adequately describe it, maybe those words aren't strong enough, but just because some teachers may have been super pissed off that their rights were trampled on, that the notwithstanding clause was invoked, that the right to strike was pulled away from them, or the right to negotiate their new contract, to collectively bargain their new contract was taken away, does not mean that those teachers all spilled back into their schools and started dragging the premier in front of their students, right? So do we have evidence that this is actually a real issue? I'm not convinced. The flag thing is very interesting. And I know that for a lot of people, like a pride flag is a real trigger, right? For a lot of people, a flag that is not the Canadian or the Alberta flag flying anywhere on public property is a real issue. And we've seen some Alberta communities and some communities elsewhere, like entire towns, outlaw any sort of flag other than the Canadian or the Alberta flag, outlaw any sort of special crosswalk, and they never say like a pride crosswalk, or they never say like a rainbow crosswalk. They never use that language, but we all know what they're doing there. Now, what does that mean on September 30th, as an example, National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Does it mean that a school is prohibited from flying an orange flag or an Every Child Matters flag? What does it mean through different times of the year when there may be significant mile markers? Maybe a school wants to fly some sort of a peace flag, or maybe a school, like, I don't know. And also, how is this going to be enforced, right? Is this like the barbaric cultural practices snitch line where parents are going to be calling in to the, So I think that this sort of creates a scenario where it reiterates the division that there is between Alberta's government and between Alberta teachers. Generally speaking, I acknowledge that that's not 100% true all the time. But I bet you that there's a lot of parents. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to this: what's the political will of a government to do something, or what are the popularity implications, right? Like, will a government gain or bleed support by doing something? And I would say in the province right now, in our home province of Alberta, Danielle Smith, despite everything, a lot of the, sort of the protest around some of the steps that the government has taken, including pulling books out of libraries. Like, if you actually think about it, pulling Orwell's 1984 or pulling Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale out of a library is a wild move. And it's a really wild move.
Atlas, what's the book?
The Ayn Rand book. Yeah. But personal hero of Danielle Smith's. So, that on surface is like pulling the book that warns that books are going to be pulled. Pulling 1984 is an unbelievable move, really. But the fact of the matter is, Danielle Smith's popularity has not waned, and that will continue to embolden this government to stay the course.
Sure.
And the question is, ultimately, what does this look like, and what are the political implications? We'll find out what Naheed Nenshi has to say about it in the next episode of the show. We hope you'll join us.
I can't wait. Yeah, I think one thing you touched on that's just like the idea that, like, all teachers are like these tyrannical Marxist, they're just they're like us. Nobody wants to go to work every day and face the smoke. Nobody wants extra job. Teachers are already overworked. They don't want to have to deal with the parents of the kids more and get into arguments about politics. I was talking, two of my friends are teachers, sisters, and I was asking them about this last week. I was like, do you talk about politics? She's like, no. She's like, why would I ever? And she's like, you know what she asked me? She said, think back to high school. Name your teachers and tell me which ones were conservative and liberal. I can't remember. I mean, I remember which ones I saw in midnight mass who I thought obviously were religious, but my family wasn't very religious, and we were at midnight mass every Christmas. So, like, this idea that teachers are going to school wanting drama, wanting smoke, wanting to indoctrinate kids, have fights with parents, and wave a flag for their political and religious beliefs, it's just insane to me. And yeah, they do have a little bit of nurses, teachers, they all have gripes with Danielle Smith, but at the same time,
not all. It's
at the same time, they don't. I was just going to mention, we have 3 friends, you know them well, all nurses. They work up in Fort McMurray. Were they fully satisfied with the deal that nurses got? No, but you know what they said? Hey, it was nice. I got a raise. My paycheck the next week was bigger. Like, it's not like they're going to work every day with a strike sign in their hand. And people just don't want the smoke. They want to go do their jobs. And especially for people like nurses and teachers, like the nurses I was talking to, they're like, yeah, I got a raise, but I'm still overworked. I'm still doing more than my job. I think teachers are in the same boat. They're doing way more than they did 10 years ago. They're dealing with now that parents, students can email them at all hours of the day, and with social media, they have to hide their personal life. Like, it's a whole other ball of wax for them. So for them to want more drama, like people say that they want to go to school every day and stand on a soapbox, that's just not realistic.
Yeah, the thing for me too is I won't spend too much time on this point I want to make, but one of the great luxuries in Real Talkers, this wouldn't be possible without you, our audience, and this wouldn't be possible without our sponsors. But like for John and I to have had this entire other angle on our career, like this era that my intention is to take me into retirement, and I'll be here as long as you guys are here. Like, this is just a huge luxury, John, and it's a huge honor, and we feel a huge responsibility as well. But to be able to speak freely, to be able to explore thought, to be able to make mistakes
That's
in
what I'm
front of an
afraid of. You
audience
can't take
and
that.
hash out ideas and to be open to changing your mind and to critically think and to remain curious, to ask unpopular questions. Like, what is the role of a school? And I'm not talking about like grade 4 and, portraying like certain politicians as the Messiah and other politicians as the Antichrist. That's not what I'm talking about. But I'm talking about in grade 9 and 10 and 11 and 12, helping students understand what critical thinking looks like and exploring different ideas. And teachers have to be able to utilize their judgment that they have developed in their own personal journeys as well as years of school. In many cases, you have teachers in classrooms with grad degrees in education. A lot of these teachers have spent 5-6 years in post-secondary, or they've been doing the job for 20 years. And I know that there's a lot of armchair quarterbacks and people that pretend or that have actually convinced themselves, that better. We saw this through the teacher strike, Johnny, people saying, well, it's time to fire all the teachers and like hire a whole new batch in Alberta, or I'm just going to homeschool my kids, which is, you're right. And no shade on homeschooling, but it does have its downfalls. And I mean, whatever. I mean, I'm not here to pick a fight with homeschoolers. That's fine. You do you. I'm just saying, like, we trust professionals to understand what is in the best interest of the child, what is the best approach to prepare them and equip them for the world ahead and for the challenges ahead. Yeah. And how are you going to do that if teachers' hands are tied behind their backs? The idea that school is still in 2026, like, what have we just talked about today? We've talked to Sharan Kaur about, a million things, but including the reality, like the visceral impact of deep fakes and AI on a person's personal and professional being. We've talked to 2 experts here on the digital risks that could hurt your reputation, that could hurt your finances, that could hurt your future. Like, the world is changing, and to sort of have this idea, especially as a political leader, as a premier of the province, that the single role of schools is reading, writing, and arithmetic is in my mind, no pun intended, but it's a very elementary understanding of what school needs to look like in 2026 or 2030. I understand why the government's doing it. I think that we've talked here about the political strategy behind it. Everybody understands and knows what's going on. But I would also like to see leadership from a government, and we'll talk to the education minister about this next week after the Easter break. I would like to see a government that reflects an understanding of the risks and the challenges and the realities that today's young adults are facing and will face as full-grown adults moving forward, and a curriculum and an education system that prepares them for that and that reflects that clear understanding. And I don't know if this is a step in the right direction. Alberta's the only province that's doing this.
It's to me, it's just a bunch of blockades to learning. That's when I think back to high school. I mean, most of my teachers, and I grew up in a small town, pretty rural, like right next to rural and farmers and whatever. Most kids were white. Most kids were Christian or raised kind of that side of life. And I think of what I learned. It's not like my teachers would get up there and say, this is my view, this is me being critical of the government. They're supposed to invite thought and debate. Like they throw something out there and then the class would debate, right? Mm-hmm. I just don't see how you teach history without talking about Democrats and Republicans and conservatives and liberals, and how do you have a model UN without all these things are going through my head right now. And the last thing I come to every time is like, this is just kind of a Trojan horse to be like, you can't be critical of the government, especially the one here in this province. And that's come on, we all know that's wrong, right? Like, I don't think teachers are inviting a big debate on our leaders here in Alberta in class, but you have to be able to have free thought, speech, and thinking going on, especially when you're young. And that doesn't mean like hate speech or people screaming at each other, but just like I said, a teacher laying the playing field and the kids get on the field and play the game. Like it just seems like it's going to put up walls and blockade. I can just see teachers getting emails and texts from parents about, you mentioned this or you mentioned that. Where's the line? Where's the line with the politics? You can talk about this in that other country or this other problem, but you can't talk about here. Like it's just going to slow. the students are going to suffer. That's all I see.
Yeah, I want to check in with Real Talkers, and obviously, courtesy of California Closets with our live stream, you're watching us across 7 different social media platforms. Let's check in on Real Talkers that are watching us live on Facebook right now. Marjorie says, bringing in curriculum, starting with elementary, working on to junior high. Kristen says the huge challenge here is who determines where opinion begins and nonpartisan fact begins, right? Like what one person perceives as balance is another person's too far right or too far left. Kristen is bang on with that. She says the last thing I want is partisan governments determining what is nonpartisan. Like Kristen throws a bullseye with that. Meantime, Tyrone says, I've seen with my own eyes teachers pushing NDP. And then Tyrone does the ellipsis with commas, which would earn you an F, by the way, Tyrone. Anyway, he says, start with Bonnyville. He's drawing a target on Bonnyville. Says anybody that says it doesn't happen, you're not paying attention or you're just a fucking liar. That from Tyrone. Robert says, my high school teacher openly taught socialism was the best and how the NDP was the only party that wanted it. Lo and behold, a couple of years after I graduated, he had a promotion to principal of a different school. Meantime, the other social studies teacher at the school, more of a conservative, who consistently had better results, was not even asked. Funny how that works. So I think what Robert's exhibited here is that he had teachers presenting different viewpoints in school, and it stuck with him, and he remembered. One of the things I think that's interesting as well about this is that it gives the government more of a say on like the appointment of superintendents
100%.
and more of a role in the board.
Yeah.
Don't ever forget 27 years ago, at the relative early stages of her career, now Alberta Premier Danielle Smith was a school trustee down in Calgary, and it was described as a board, the CBE board at that time in 1999, as dysfunctional. As a matter of fact, then board chair Teresa Wupa, who will be a familiar name for those of you that have been following Alberta politics for a while, described the board as failing to act in an adult manner. And that was why then Minister of Learning, they called him at the time, Minister of Education, essentially, Lyle Oberg at the time, dissolved the dysfunctional Calgary Board of Education board, the board, after only 10 months due to intense board fighting and unprofessional conduct. So it's interesting. Smith has been on the receiving end of the minister dissolving the board, the elected board. And now this government, 27 years later, is saying that they want to start basically asserting themselves more, at least overseeing the appointment of superintendents and the like.
Overseeing. Maybe that's why they're taking 1984 out of schools. Let's just put cameras in the classrooms, body cams on the teachers. Let's see them smoking on their breaks. Let's show the parents how bad their kids are acting in class and going on their phone. Let's totally just chastise every single person who enters an educational building. Let's expose them all, Ryan.
I think that, you get to a point where, you create too much of a chill in certain professions, and you're going to start turning people away from it. And it's not always something that would manifest or exhibit itself immediately. You know what I'm saying? But you get these maybe same high school students now that are, between 1 and 10 years away, depending on career trajectory from deciding what they want to do or entering the workforce. And if they're seeing this contentious relationship, and if they're seeing, a lot of the junk that comes along with the job, when you're working in certain industries, which are very important industries, I say industries, professions, including education and healthcare, you could be creating a longer term issue that maybe we don't see coming at the time, or at least not everybody sees coming. Jill, checking in as a junior high school teacher, says, imagine thinking the appointment to principal was based on only things you observed as a student, which is a fair comment as well. Ms. Katie says, I think Robert thinks he knows more than he does. That is not how promotions work. Aaron says the non-government government finds a way to be more government. Let us know what you think about this to talk@ryanjespersen.com. We'll continue the conversation in our next episode of the show with opposition leader, Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi. A lot to get to as well. I mean, I guess we'll probably start. We'll see how it goes. I always like guests on this. Here's a little peek behind the curtain as an interview. I'm a bit of a wild animal, a bit of a bucking bronco, where I'll say to people, this is probably what we're going to lead with, but I'll see how the mood strikes, right? Sometimes it'll be live chat, Johnny, that turns us in a different direction out of the gates. My initial inclination with Naheed Nenshi will probably be to ask about the schools tomorrow first, but we got to ask whether or not he's considering rebranding the Alberta NDP in light of the Avi Lewis win as well. You can always send in your questions, ones you'd like to hear our guests answer, to talk@ryanjespersen.com, and that would include an early edition of The Flamethrower presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. I was just there the other night, Johnny. Absolutely unbelievable. I love how they do the Choco Dip cones for the kids. It's always such a pleasure checking in with the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park.
I don't know if I want to expose this hack, but if you ask them, what's a nice DQ drive-through man or woman,
you have my full attention,
service person,
yes,
to put a straw through a medium-sized vanilla cone.
What purpose does it serve?
And funnel chocolate into the center.
What?
Or caramel.
Are you serious?
Don't tell anyone I did that.
We're gonna hear from the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park,
and then
they're now being hit with
coated in chocolate after. Woo!
Oh, dude. Okay. Meta Modern, by the way, says, everybody sees what's coming, Jespo. The trouble is that some people welcome and hasten it. That's also a fair comment. We'll keep these conversations going. Again, an early edition of The Flamethrower. That's going to be coming up in our next episode. That is the 2nd of April. That's going to be our final episode before the Easter break. We're taking Good Friday off, be with our families, and then we'll be back on the Monday. Look at us. Just look at us, John. Back on the Monday with Supriya Dwivedi, who's going to join us. Before we wrap, I do want to let you know, Real Talkers, that you can now get your tickets. Tickets are now on sale for Northwest Film Fest, and Real Talk is such a proud partner of Northwest Film Fest, and we have been ever since the show launched. Why? Because we know the impact that this film festival has had, Canada's longest-running nonfiction film festival, on the arts, including championing the incredible films that Canadian filmmakers are releasing year after year, and this year is no different. You can get your festival tickets right now at northwestfest.ca. Browse the lineup. They've got some amazing films that are going to be screening right here in the capital city of Alberta at the Metro Cinema at the Garneau. They have the best popcorn in the city, and they're licensed. You can grab a cold beer if you feel led while you're watching films like She Cried That Day. It follows Christine Means as she seeks justice for her sister's death, becoming a voice in the missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives movement in New Mexico. Powerful stuff. What about Suburban Fury, examining the 1975 assassination attempt on U.S. President Gerald Ford by Sarah Jane Moore, a conservative middle-aged single mom from San Francisco who became radicalized while working as an FBI informant. Wild stuff. And we were talking to you as well about Never Get Busted. I can't wait to see this on April 10th. This is Barry Cooper, a former Texas narcotics officer. He became an anti-drug war activist and started teaching people how to avoid police searches and exposing corrupt officers. Fascinating stuff. That's just a few. Mr. Goalie, the story of Glenn Hall, the pride of Stony Plain. Tutu, the story of Jordan Tutu. Remember, he was here on the show last year talking about that film, and more, including the 50th anniversary of one of my favorite films of all time, starring Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford. May he rest in peace. The 50th anniversary of All the President's Men. All of this and more screening at Northwest Film Fest. It starts second week of April. You can get your tickets today at northwestfest.ca, and if you support Real Talk on Patreon or as a Real Deal or Real VIP member, you're going to be receiving a message today on how you can claim your free tickets to Northwest Fest. As we wrap, Real Talkers, we remind you how much we appreciate your engagement with the show. We see you in the chat, encouraging everybody to like and subscribe to it, to share the content. We look to grow our footprint as we grow these conversations and deepen our understanding of the world around us. Doesn't happen with you, Real Talkers, and for that, we thank you. We'll be back tomorrow with Nahed Nenshi and a Real Talk Roundtable on harm reduction.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jespersen, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjespersen.com.